My name is Amira Harin. I am a student from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. Thank you for being part of ULI today. The program today is in 3 sections. First off, a 10-minute talk by our speaker, Ambassador Chan Heng Chee, a 20-minute interview with Viswa Sadasivan, Chairman of the ULI Organizing Committee, and a 30-minute Q&A session. If you wish to ask a question, please make your way to the microphones placed along the aisle, introduce yourself, and speak directly into them. This is important so that the online community is able to hear your question. Thank you for your kind attention. Please sit back and enjoy.
You alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ambassador Chan Heng Chee.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me? Yes. Great. I don't want to begin with an apology, but I really apologize for keeping all of you waiting. It wasn't my fault. Well, it's really lovely to be back at the National University of Singapore and to have a platform, a speaking slot. You know, I am an alumni member. I was a student at the National University of Singapore, actually the University of Singapore. That's way before 1980. And my career, my professional career, also began with the National University of Singapore. I was 3 years a student of the University of Singapore, a political science honors student. In those days, you could do a degree, honors degree, in 3 years. I was one of the lucky ones who did a 3-year honors course. Politics, history, and literature, English literature. And I taught for about 21 years at the university before I became a diplomat and did other things as well. So NUS is very special for me. My university days were happy days. I was excited. I started a university adventure. Life was different. I don't know how many of the students today actually say, I want to be an intellectual. You know, in my time, we were so painfully intellectual. And I wanted to be an intellectual. Now, this may sound funny because you want to be a banker, you want to be an engineer, you want to be an architect. But I tried to live the life of an intellectual. I was very lucky. Before I joined the university, after I finished my A-levels, I had to do some work. Money was not a lot in the family. So I gave private tuition. I think a lot of you did that. Many students I know give private tuition. I gave private tuition. Neighborhood kids, next, another street, they sort of said, she's a clever girl, she'll be a good teacher. So I gave these classes. But I also went to work in the newspapers, the Singapore Free Press. And I became a stringer at 63.5 cents per square inch column if they published you. If you gave a photograph, they paid you more. But I must say, that stint, working in the newspaper, and later I wrote for Her World and so on, that really was great. Because in the newspaper world, I met people who were interested in politics, in the arts, writing. There was Yen Mok Ai, who wrote mood pieces. And I got into that swing. So by the time I entered the university, I became very interested in being an intellectual, because everybody in the newspapers talked of being an intellectual. And this may interest you. Whilst I was working in the Straits Times, I wanted more money. I wanted to earn more money because I was trying to save up for the university. And I went to the Vietnam Press. Someone recommended me to a job in something called the Vietnam Press Agency. There was a journalist called Tony Trong. And he said, OK, I'll hire you. He ticked off the items of news. And he said, please press say this. I'm going to send this all back to Hanoi. Those were the days when Hanoi, and this was what, 1960? You know, because I entered university in 1961. Saigon was going through turmoil. And I did all this, and he just sent it over. I was paid very little. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I write a feature. So he wrote the feature. I summarized the news. When I got into the university, I was ready to discuss politics, to be interested. So that really helped me. Once I entered the university, I was lucky enough to meet someone called Chandra Mohan. Many of you here may know him. He became a producer in the Singapore Broadcasting Corporation, TV producer, and later he ran it. He grabbed me and he said, Freshie, come here. And in my days, there was ragging. It's actually bullying, you know. It's terrible. But I was lucky enough, and I met Chandra Mohan. He dragged me into the library, and he said, this is the periodicals library. Look at the periodicals. And I did. He said, you should come in and see what's new. He also said, come and look at these journals on film. I saw journals on film. Then Cahiers de Cinéma, which is a French influential magazine on film, but published in English. And I got interested. A year later, I was running the Singapore Film Society. When I was in the university, I mixed with people who wanted to publish literary publications. Now, think of this. This is the time of 1961. There was discussion about Malaysia, merger with Malaysia. Politics was really just bubbling in Singapore. There was a group that were very interested in producing a literary magazine. It was called Temasek. The leading light there, pushing this magazine along, was Goh Po Seng, Dr. Goh Po Seng, who's now dead. Boy, they're all dead now, you know. And Goh Po Seng did the literary magazine. And I got involved in that too. And then there was the English department with Dennis Enright trying to encourage everybody to produce a magazine. We produced Focus. There was Focus that was produced. And I wrote a poem there called The Safer Art. I'll tell you about this later, but I sent a poem in. And so it went on. Now, I am saying all this because I want students today to know that life can be rich, life can be exciting whilst you are an undergraduate and you are studying. I don't know what people do today, but when I was in the university, life was quite interesting. And by the way, I dated a lot too, you know. So I worked hard, I dated, I joined all these groups, and I remember at one stage, the head of my department said, my God, you better buckle down, because if you don't, you get a third class. I was so shocked. I studied, and I studied very hard. I ended up with a first. But we did a lot. I say this because a life that is diverse, a student life that is filled with activity, and a person who keeps doing a lot of things is really very important. And that is the way that one should prepare oneself to deal with the world later. I say this because I'm slightly disappointed when some of my younger colleagues, they come as diplomats, or they are people I meet, young professionals, they tell me, actually, they don't do very much. They don't have much opportunities to do work. Cannot be. There are far more opportunities for work, to do internships here and there. And the opportunities were not there in Singapore. We had to look for it. And so I looked for it. And interestingly, I found by the time I became a lecturer, I did quite a lot of things too, and then I became an ambassador. That was the best preparation for me. This diverse background, going to the newspapers, because I became media savvy, I learned how to deal with the press and to work with the press and to use the press to project Singapore. I was interested in the arts, literature, acting, film. And when you go as an ambassador elsewhere, you begin also to be able to engage others. They don't just want to talk foreign policy with you all the time. You don't go in to see somebody and just say 3 questions that your cable asked you to ask. You don't do that. You have to start with a conversation and build a relationship. And I keep telling my colleagues, you have to make yourself interesting. Because if you're not interesting, why would anyone speak to you or talk to you? So that ability to develop, engage in activity is extremely important. And to develop your initiative. Because what I want to say, especially to young friends and to those who are, and I see many students here, those who are going to go out in the world today, you do need that background. You need an entrepreneurial spirit, and that is what is so missing these days. If you talk to people in organizations, they will tell you, what we are looking for is creative leadership. An organization has to show creative leadership. What is creative leadership? There are 2 sides to it. It's creative, and you have to show leadership as well. And to be creative, it is to have initiative, to look at things with a different eye, opportunities. I've been asked, what does an ambassador do? What is a good ambassador? And I would say, an ambassador is a political entrepreneur. And you are a leader. And a leader is one who makes things possible or makes things happen where otherwise it would not happen. So you have to be creative. You've got to make things happen where it does not happen. It would otherwise not happen. You've got to see an opportunity in things. And how do you do that? How do you develop a penchant to identify that set of circumstances? And it is because you've done many things when you are young, you try out, take risks, do different things. Don't just study in the library. And that will help prepare you to be creative, you take risks, and to have the leadership because you want to act and take action in things. So I think that's very important. And I say this because, I've been away for 16 years now. I was 2 years ambassador at the United Nations. Then I was 16 years in Washington. It was not consecutive because I went to the UN, stayed for 2 years, came back because, I had to deal with a personal problem. And I did something else in Singapore, and I was sent out again on a diplomatic posting, this time to the United States, 16 years. In the 16 years in the United States, I have watched others. I have watched people come from the region, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Koreans, Japanese, Latins, Africans, they all come to Washington. Everybody is getting smart. Everybody is getting competitive. The world is connected today by ITC technology. The earth is really flat. People move, knowledge moves. Countries can leapfrog, or everyone serves, and you can pick up knowledge everywhere. So what will distinguish one from the other? Now, Singapore has done very well. Believe me, when I'm outside of Singapore, when I'm in the United States, Americans, Latin Americans, people in the Middle East, Africa, everywhere, come to me and tell me what a wonderful place Singapore is. I know today everybody finds a lot that they want change in Singapore. And yes, we want things changed, that's what happens. But I would suggest that there are also so many things that are right with Singapore that other countries would also give an arm and a leg for. But I see others coming up, and they are good, and they are knowledgeable, they're IT savvy, they have a lot of push and dare. And that Singaporean students are smart. On paper, they are very smart. I go to universities, you know, and teachers there, whether it's Wharton, whether it's Harvard, it's Purdue, it's Austin, Texas, Berkeley, Stanford, and they tell me, your students are very good, you know, very good in their exams. They always do well. Then they stop, you know. Then that's fine. Then there's a talk that's given, and I could be accompanying a minister, or the prime minister, or the deputy prime minister, and we're in a big hall. Not a single Singaporean student asks a question. Why? An Indonesian stands up, puts up his hand, he asks in fractured English, but you know what he's talking about. He's getting better. The Chinese student, he's always asking, boys, girls, you know. Again, English not great, but you know what the question is. It's a profound question. It's a good question. And so on and so forth, you know. I've seen this from Thais. I've seen this from Koreans, Japanese. But the Singapore student doesn't want to ask a question. And, you know, it really bothered me so much that one day I was speaking to this student, and this was in Penn, Wharton. I said, have you ever asked a question in class? He said, no, never. I said, why not? He said, don't know. I just don't feel like it. So I said, can you promise me by the end of this year, you would have asked a question in class? But to me, it is quite discomforting to know that, because it's about speaking out and presenting. And I think it is important for young people to know, not only have you got to be good in your written work, you've got to sell. You've got to sell your idea. You've got to sell your project. And that means you have to stand up and make a presentation. And you have to make a presentation in a language others understand. That is saleable, and it must travel in Thailand, in the Philippines, in China, in India, in the United States. So, you know, Singlish is great for intimacy and to create a bond amongst ourselves. But when you are selling, when you are making a presentation to a client, especially when you're going overseas, language is very important. You know, so but that is what I find, you know, that I think our students have to pick up on. Young people have to pick up on. Not only young people, middle-aged people, older people, because we are all making a living in the world. And we are all up against competition. Yeah. But it's not just that. The world is really so much with us, and things are happening. Things are very fluid. And new powers are emerging. You know, new economies are becoming competitive. Those that you didn't think were so competitive are becoming more competitive. So it is a good idea to keep up reading the news, keep up with the events, so that when you go out, you're on the uptake and you know what to do and how to address an issue. And before you go out to another country, it's always good to know about the culture and have some knowledge of that country. Now, I have to say, although I say this is what I hope younger people and people in Singapore would take up on, I must add that I come back to this, the admiration for Singaporeans is very strong. You know, American soldiers, Pentagon, they tell me, your soldiers, and most of you have been through NS, they are so well trained. They are really tops, We work with them, and they are fine. And I think that's what comes through. Professionally, technically, our people are very competent. Now we've just got to add that little extra so that we can keep up with the competition and keep our place, because it is getting to be a far more competitive world where everyone is bettering himself and herself. I think I'll stop here. Yeah? Thank you.
Heng Chee, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Viswa.
You know, as I was sitting there watching you, I couldn't help recollecting the time when I was a student and you were a lecturer. In fact, the reason why I took political science, I mean, you were one of the key reasons why I took political science. In fact, it wasn't you, it was your hair. She had long hair. And, I'm sure when you were lecturing in Bukit Timah in 1980, you would have spotted this group of people, good-looking guys, great body. I used to sit next to them. Thank you. You still have the same fire in the belly.
Thank you.
And a little tempered. I guess diplomacy does that for you.
Age too.
Age too, huh? We all blame it on age, but actually, sometimes it's the intervening occupations.
Yeah.
In June of 6th of June 1986, you wrote a letter to the Straits Times, and I'd like to read it out to you. 1986. The letter starts, the Acting Minister of Community Development and Minister of State Communications and Information, Mr. Wong Kan Seng, pronounced on a very basic principle on which Singapore's politics is to be built. And then you go on to talk about, you go on to say, it is not the role of professional societies to get involved in issues of public. This is what Mr. Wong Kan Seng said, and this is your quote. It is not the role of professional societies to get involved in issues of public policy which do not affect their professional interests. Then you say, the Law Society, in issuing a public comment on the Newspaper and Printing Presses Act, or bill, was deemed to have strayed beyond the ambit of professional interests and was acting in that instance as a pressure group towards the government. Some of us of a certain vintage will recall this incident. This message must be examined carefully because of the implications it carries for the kind of society we are creating. What is denied in the speech is the place of public debate and participation in public policy making in Singapore. This cannot be the sort of society that the People's Action Party envisages as it strives to establish a modern, sophisticated economy, a society of excellence in the year 2000. To begin with, in a constitutional democracy, which Singapore considers itself to be, every citizen has a right to comment on public policy. An irresponsible and seditious comment can be taken care of by our laws of libel, sedition, and the Internal Security Act. But the right exists. Every citizen has the right to comment on public policy because it affects his economic interests, his personal security, and the way in which he is to live his life, and because government is a social contract between the elected and the electorate. There are other reasons why public policy or public debate on public policy in Singapore should be welcomed. And point number one, the practice of listening to reasoned argumentation sharpens a population's ability to distinguish sound arguments from catchy rhetoric and responsible and informed criticism from irresponsible and misinformed allegations. Number two, since the '84 general elections, the government has admitted to the importance of feedback to fine-tune policies and improve implementation. To curtail public debate on public policy makes chokes, making chokes of feedback and making chokes of feedback and impoverishes the pool of ideas and foresight that could otherwise be gathered. Number three, At the present stage of Singapore's development, we are evolving a much more complex domestic, social, and economic structure, and an equally complex and fluid economic and political environment is emerging externally. The likelihood that the government possesses all the right answers to all questions is most unrealistic. It is therefore necessary to invite public debate in policy making to strengthen the final formulation of policy, which the government must then make decisively and firmly. Finishing. Last paragraph of your letter. The development of knowledge, the interlinking of fields of knowledge, and the development of new functions and roles of professionals would argue for a wider interpretation of professional interests. More than ever, now in Singapore, we cannot afford a cult of silence as we strive for qualitative improvements to society. When Singaporeans make public comment on public policy, it is not because they seek a playground to amuse themselves, as Mr. Wong Kan Seng said, but because they seek to preserve and protect their home and their political legacy. Chan Heng Chee, 1986. So,
I would have written it more crisply now.
More crisply now. Now, this was in 86.
Yeah.
You were appointed ambassador in 89.
Yes.
Was that a coincidence?
I do not think so, Viswa. I know people have said that, you know, I was
That was
sent
a speculation.
off, yes,
that was
as
a
an
speculation.
ambassador.
You were conveniently packed off.
I don't think so, because for it to have happened in 89, they must have been thinking about it, because, to be quite honest, about a year after that, I was asked.
If a year after this?
After this, which surprised me, if I would accept the appointment of an ambassadorship as PR to the United Nations. And I was the first woman then to be appointed ambassador.
PR, by the way, is not public relations. It's permanent representative.
Permanent representative to the UN. So I would say that I don't think it was it was a convenient way to send me off. In fact, it may have stopped them, for a bit to say, is she the right one then, if this is what is written, So, yeah. And people think I was bought off. I wasn't bought off, What is there to buy off? I've been...
You weren't paid very well anyway.
Yeah, I wasn't paid well, you're right. Because I think at that time, most people say, Biswa, that, I sort of sold out, gave up. If they had read everything I wrote carefully, they would know that I was very balanced. I disagreed with the government on some policies, not all policies, and I wrote about it. I wanted intellectual space. I wanted, the opposition to have room. But on some of these social policies, I agreed. On the foreign policies, I agreed. So whenever I wrote, it was balanced, But of course, people read what they want to read in it. And because I wrote about political space, more freedom to speak in such a committed way, people just felt, read into it and I believe it.
I hear the word balance being used quite often.
By me?
Not by you.
Oh.
By most diplomats.
Uh-huh.
And it sounds like a euphemism for not taking a stand.
No, I'm not a right hand, left hand, two-handed person. I take a stand, but I try.
You used to, obviously.
I did.
Do you
I
still?
think I do.
Do you
I
still?
do, and I think today I take a stand. I have been arguing more in favor of government, and that's a very difficult stance in today's Singapore. You get a lot of brickbats for that. But I do believe that there has been a good job done. It's not so easy to run countries. When you look around countries elsewhere, something has been right, So, so now I begin to point out what is right, because I think many Singaporeans do not see that very much. And so we lose a reference point. We're always criticizing. What is the reference point? You know, because if this is bad, what is good? What is perfect? Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that that would have drawn a fair amount of comments suggesting that you have turned coat.
No, I have not.
No, I mean, I'm saying you would
Yeah.
have received that.
I
In
have.
fact, I
have.
had, when I said that I was going to interview today, quite a few people
Yes.
among the intelligentsia had suggested that you had lost the fire that you used to have in your belly. How would you respond to that?
Well, I haven't lost fire in my belly. The fire is directed elsewhere, you know. Yeah. You know, I'm still very concerned, and I would say this, I am concerned about the bottom line, you know, and safety nets. And what do you do with those who are, you know, less fortunate, you know, less well off? I've always been concerned about that. Must be my convent upbringing. I've been in the convent, you know, when I was in school, we went to the orphanages to play with the orphans and so on. But I still have that concern, you know, and I'm concerned with what is a decent wage, you know, and how to treat people properly. Yes.
You recently were featured in a China Daily interview piece, right?
Yes.
And I'd like to pick this up. I mean, this was about a couple of weeks ago. In the interview, you said, when you are young, you are an idealist. Certainly, I fought for more intellectual space for a more liberal Singapore. It's put in past tense.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that at this point in time, idealism has died?
No.
Or are you apologizing for what you said earlier?
What I do see is that Singapore today is a much more liberal Singapore in some ways than what I went through, you know, saw in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's what's changed.
Okay.
You know, I mean, the kind of plays you get, you know, and some of the writings, things have changed in Singapore. And more people are active, there are more civil society groups, you know. I mean, that's good. And that has changed.
And,
you know?
and for that, that's what you mean by we need people with a broader spectrum of views.
Yes.
And I guess that's what you meant by more balanced. Not you're either with me or against me kind of a view.
Yes, but also if you are against, you have to have some sort, you must know why, you see, and the good reasons. But you must have examined what the reasons for were and why were they wanting, you know. Yeah, I do believe in the balance.
Yeah. Earlier on in your talk, you had said that a good ambassador, in your view, is someone who makes something happen which otherwise wouldn't have. Could you give us an instance of when you did it? Perhaps you could talk about the Cambodia vote when you first took office in the UN.
Well, yeah, you know, let me tell you that when you're sent off as an ambassador to represent your country, you don't get a lot of instruction. You know roughly an agenda, you know, some countries may send off their ambassadors and say, now when you go out there, I would like you to get a free trade agreement done with the United States. They don't tell you how to do it, but it's up to you to think up how you're going to get it started and what to do. And since Singapore was one of the early countries to have concluded a free trade agreement in recent years, you know, a lot of ambassadors came to see me to say, how do you do it? How do you start a free trade agreement? I said, mine was very easy. You've got to get the United States to agree. And my Prime Minister, Goh Chok Tong, played golf with Bill Clinton, and they agreed on the golf course to do the free trade agreement. But I said, well, you've got to try and get that done. You can maybe engineer a golf game, you know.
Yeah.
You've got to find out what works, you see. So, but I do mean that ambassadors have to be entrepreneurs because you're asked to represent your country. So what do you do to represent your country? You want to better trade relations, political relations, so on and so forth. But how do you do it? Nobody tells you. You've just got to think through and be ingenious and to be creative in how you approach it. Now, let me just tell you, I'll come to Cambodia. When I arrived in Washington, it was a tail end of Michael Fay. You remember the Michael Fay incident? And we had a lot of problems with the administration. And the newspapers in the United States did not like us, you know, and they kept whacking us, criticizing us with this and that. And because that was a time when some people were talking about Asian values, you know, and that worked others up too, you know, the reaction. So, but one of the first things I did was to make a call on Washington Post, you know, to see the editors. And I was lucky because I had met Catherine Graham at a conference, and she owned Washington Post. So I called on Catherine Graham, and Catherine Graham said, what can I do for you? I said, can I meet your editorial board? So a few of them came together, and I said to them, you know, I notice you always write authoritarian countries like Iraq, Singapore, China, and there was one more, North Korea.
North Korea.
I said, are you serious? You think Singapore is like these countries? He said, oh no. Anyway, we don't. I said, you want to bet? Punch up the story. Because, you know, we go into IT. I said, pull out the story and have a look. Because you always put the 4 countries together. Well, they did. And I think, they said, no, you shouldn't be there. I said, well, but we are there. Oh, the other one was not North Korea, Burma, Myanmar.
Burma, okay.
Burma, they put Burma there. I think after that, they took it off. They just said, the editorials would say, the authoritarian regimes of Asia. I don't care. You don't put Singapore, that's fine. You know? So, but you've got to find a way to bring it up. And I did it straight. I went to the Lions Den, spoke. The opportunity was there. I used the opportunity. I didn't sort of mince words, you see. I'd like to go back to Cambodia because you raised it. Yeah. You know, I went to the UN in 1989. Vietnam had unilaterally withdrawn from Cambodia. You know, they went into Cambodia in '79. For 10 years, we were fighting to try to get them out. It was a big issue because we saw powerful Vietnam with all this arsenal after they had driven out the Americans. Goodness, they're going to Cambodia, what next? That was the thinking in ASEAN. So when this happened, we brought the issue to the UN, and we tried to get Vietnam out of Cambodia and to get rid of Hun Sen to go for a comprehensive political settlement with the UN elections, peacekeeping, and everything. Well, before I went to the UN, they withdrew unilaterally, but left Hun Sen there. So it's half a solution. So the issue was, will people still be with us? Because we didn't want Hun Sen there. There should be an election, and there should be an election amongst all Cambodians to choose a leader, not the one Vietnam put in.
We meaning Singapore or ASEAN?
All of ASEAN. All of ASEAN could not accept that. Yeah. So I went there, and I was told before I went, Heng Chee, this is quite a difficult situation. You may lose a vote, you may lose votes, but don't lose more than 1 or 2 votes, you know, because now you may lose ASEAN may lose a sympathy. Well, I went there and I said, okay, I cannot lose too many votes. So I just went around, you know, talking to people. And I worked very hard, you know. I went and And
you had just gone in.
I'd just gone in. I didn't know what it was to be an ambassador. I was an academic. And sometimes I spoke too much. I said, oh my God, I'm giving the state secrets away. Then I clamped. And that's no good, because if you're a diplomat that doesn't speak, nobody gives you information. You don't exchange, you see.
I mean, so the culture from being a professor to ambassador,
so you've got to find your feet. You've got to find your feet. And so that was what I did. But I went trying to sell our case, that we are just so much near. We're so near to the finish. So let's finish. Finish with me. Finish with us. Finish with ASEAN. And let's get a proper UN settlement, UN elections, peacekeeping, and so on. And I have this wonderful story. This was because I went to see the Saudi Arabian ambassador. And I went to see him and said, you know, can we have Saudi Arabia's sponsorship? You have to get sponsors for your resolution, then you've got to get the vote. If you have a lot of sponsors, well, your sponsors will vote for you, and it shows you've got the support, you see. So you try to get a lot of sponsors. And we wanted Saudi Arabia sponsorship, so I went and asked him. I was quite new. And Saudi Arabia, this benign gentleman, he was from Palestine, actually. He said, Ambassador Chan, you are a nice lady. You worked so hard. I want you to succeed. So Saudi Arabia will give you the vote and we will sponsor. You know, I sent back, Kishore was my perm sec then, and he said, how did you get it? How did you get it? I said, I don't know. You know, he just said, I'm a nice lady, I work very hard. He wants me to succeed. So one lesson, diplomacy is all about personal relationships. It really helps. You've got to make, you know, countries have relationships, yes, but personal relationships solder the relations, which is why I started giving you this detailed story of a bit of my life, you know, to show you do different things, you get about, you know how to deal with people, you're in different situations, it builds up your strength. And when later you go out, you know, it just comes. And I think that was what happened.
Yeah. You know, there was this very seasoned Asian diplomat who told me recently, when I asked him, he knows you, and asked him what he thought of you, and he said, you kind of rewrote The Art of Persuasion. Exact words.
Oh, really?
Rewrote The Art of Persuasion during your tenure in the US. I don't know whether it was including the UN, but during your tenure in the US.
Probably
what do you think it meant?
I'm trying to think, Viswa. I found out I'm a very good saleswoman. You know, I'm a saleswoman, you know. And you make a pitch. That's why I ask you, you've got to learn how to sell because it really matters. And you can be selling big things, ideas for your country. You can be selling a soapbox. You can be selling a book. But you've got to persuade. I think they just found, I was told, okay, that I could get people to change their views, to get people to buy into our views, our position. So I guess that's persuasion. And
how much of that's got to do with the various things that are seemingly irrelevant that you did in your life?
I think it has to. It has to. I'm a political scientist, but I do love literature. I read a lot, you know, and I think literature sensitizes you. It makes you aware of feelings, sentiments, how to, you know, and you have the language. You learn to have the language to speak to people. That's why you have to read and you have to do literature.
I also recall, yes, everyone, especially the engineering students, go and do literature.
No, I mean, you really have to have the language. And without the language, you can't do much. And I did it, people said, at the dining table. In Washington, you know, I did that a lot. And people say, today, someone from Washington Post just told me that he misses those salon dinners that I run.
Yeah, you should tell us about that.
Which is really to hold a dinner, but it's a seminar dinner. I don't call it seminar dinner, you know. But
you call it salon dinner.
Oh, they called it.
They call it.
Well, at first when they said, you know, you run great salons, I said, what's that? It sounds like Madame something, you know. And is it good or bad? That was what I said, is it good or bad? They say, oh, it's good. I said, okay. But I would have dinner, put good food, get good company, but I always had a theme. And I'll look around, for instance, you know, who's at the table. Sometimes I know the guests, sometimes I don't know them. And I try to get a one conversation amongst 20 people on a long table. It's not easy.
It's not easy.
Yeah? And then I throw questions, and sometimes we discuss political issues. And, you know, and sometimes I get different people from the United States coming in, different agencies. And they say, my God, you're running an interagency meeting. and they are talking, you know, and I've seen them. They said, I know your name, I see it in the email. I'm meeting you for the first time. This is Washington, you know. So I really don't know, Viswa, if you ask me. And I didn't set out with a book to say this is how I'm going to persuade.
But you also mentioned...
But you get better. I wasn't good right at the start, I think. Huh?
But the fact that you managed to hit the road running, so to speak, and it's an important ambassadorial position. UN is not an easy position to hold as your first position. But you hit the road running. It requires a certain level of confidence and self-efficacy to be able to do that. And one would imagine that came from the range of experiences that you've had, you know, and also I guess you mentioned briefly as we had the chat the last time that you hung out with a group of people, friends, you know, since we are amongst friends, alumni, you know, they make a difference, right? Your classmates, you know, the coffee, tea chats that you have in the canteen, especially Bukit Timah those days, you know. A lot of time, I mean, I remember my time, a bunch of us, we were called canteen scholars because we used to cut, but we never cut your class, you know. But we used to cut classes and go and hang out for a whole day in the canteen and just memorize speeches, great speeches, Martin Luther King and the others, and it had absolutely no bearing on the grades, you know. But, you know, you talked about your friends, the people, the intellectual climate.
Yes.
Yeah. Would you share a little bit of that?
Oh, you know, I mean, I was unkindly called an intellectual snob. And I used to say, what's that, you know? Those who are good athletes don't want to hang out with wimps. What are they? Athletic snobs, you know? And those who go for money, they hang amongst just rich people. What are they? Money snobs. So you hang around people who talk the same language and discuss the same things. But it doesn't mean you don't empathize with others or spend time helping those who need help, you see. So, but I guess I always looked for people who were interested in politics. You know, Washington is a one-industry town. It's just politics. If you don't like the industry, it's boring. Well, I liked politics, and I met people in Singapore who taught politics. And there are lots of people who are very serious and engaged and, you know, you know, so I hung out with them, you know. I don't want to name them, you know, but a lot of you know them, you know, and I did that. But coming back, Viswa, you just reminded me. You said, what prepared me? You know, I seem to attract controversy without meaning to. Let me tell you how. There were 3 big controversies that I attracted that really taught me, steeled me a bit. One was, you know, I worked as a stringer, as I said. So before I entered the university, you know, I entered the university at 19. At 18, I was working in this newspaper just before that. And the editor of the Straits Times said to me, you know, hey, you're going to go to the university. You're the first one from your family to go to the university? I said, yes. Why don't you write a piece for me? We put it on the Sunday feature. What does it feel like to be the first member of your family to go to the university? So I wrote an article. And I used a pen name because I said, well, I'm going in, you know, Chan Heng Chee. I'll be ragged. So if I use a pen name, nobody knows. I'll use my home name, Daisy Chan.
That's your home name?
Yes,
Daisy?
that's my home name.
You don't look like Daisy. Do you think she looks like Daisy? No. Okay.
As fresh as a daisy. Anyway, Gatsby and Daisy. But so I wrote that piece, you know. I'm sure it was quite maudlin, you know. I don't know. I don't even want to read it again. But the moment I entered the university, they had found out, all the senior gentlemen, who is this freshman? Who is this freshie that dares to stand up like a tall poppy and talk about her family and so on? It's so university. You don't do that. You hide, you know. But, you know, hey, it's my job. I was asked to write by my editor, so I just wrote it. I was so ragged during that time, but that article came out, boom, and it was like, you know, I just attracted all this attention, and not very, some of it nice attention, a lot of it unkind attention when I got into the university. And as I said, they can be bullies, and can make you feel, oh, so you think so much about yourself, and da. Well, you know, so that was one. Second time, in my first year, I sent in this poem. I was going to come back to it, to focus. I called it the safer art. I compared painting with writing. And I said, you know, when you write and you are crystal clear, everybody knows. But when you paint, you know, hieroglyphics, you splash paint, nobody knows what you are doing. So if you're an artist, you are doing protest art, nobody knows that. Well, I sent it in. They didn't take it. I was told, Enright looked at the first collection and said, is this the best you can come up with? Let's see the rejects. So mine was brought up. And I said, well, this is not bad. Why don't you just put this one in? So the safer art got into focus. But they put it on the inside page, first page. And when that happened, Francis Huang was the editor of Sunday Times, and he writes these columns. He said, oh, the university is taking a stand. The safer art is a manifesto for literary freedom, because they say writing is not safe, painting is safe. You know, it became a big thing in the papers. And again, I attracted the controversy. I wasn't thinking, I just wrote, this is a safer art. I wasn't making a political statement. I just thought one evening, oh, I'll write 2 stanzas, 2 verses on that. And that was what happened. So that was another controversy. Next time, I came back from Cornell. I was like 25 years old. After an MA, I started teaching. I published my MA thesis, Singapore, the Politics of Survival, Oxford monograph. And Alex Josie trashed it and said it was rubbish and I didn't understand it.
Was he already press secretary to PM?
This I forgot, but everybody knew Alex Josie, you know. So he slammed me in a review, and everybody bought the book, you know. So they bought.
Did you arrange for that slam?
No. Well, I was asked to write a response, a rejoinder. Okay. And so there was this controversy. So as I said, I seem to attract controversy. But, you know, each time, when it first happens, you know, now I can laugh at it. You sort of take a start and you wonder, oh gosh, you know, now I've got to deal with this. And don't forget, Singapore in the late 60s did not want to stand up and deal with politics, to respond to a political writer and that sort of thing. Yeah? So I think all that honed me.
So as a trustee of NUS, do you plan to sort of get our profile up by using your natural capacity to...
No. Well, I went to Yale and
You can easily rise above the din.
No, I went to Yale and I made a speech in Yale against what the Yale faculty was saying. You know, I mean, no, that was a time, as you get older, you don't. You mellow. It's the natural, you know, cycle of life. And I don't, of course you mellow, you know. It's only natural. And I don't have to apologize for it at all. I like this state.
On that Zen note, let's throw it open to the floor. As I always remind you, questions, comments, but please no speeches. Huh? Yes, sir. Hey, give him a hand, our old faithful. He's been here for every single session.
Thank you.
Yeah. My name is Tan Si Ping, graduate of the University of Malaya at that time, 1955. It occurs to me that during your student days, were there any political activities allowed, since you are studying political science? Remember the Fajar affair?
Yeah.
So how you don't get yourself involved with all this trouble with the CID and all that?
No, Fajar was before my time.
I know.
But when I was in the university, there were lots of forums and debates on the battle on merger, you know, whether merger was a good thing or bad thing. And Lee Kuan Yew gave a series of lectures on the radio called The Battle for Merger. 13 lectures.
Oh, okay.
And no, I didn't participate in political activity, but we just watched, we listened. I hung around the undergrad office.
Are you sort of prompting, suggesting that it should be revived?
No. What I'm trying to say is, since you are involved in politics and all that, and it is quite a hot topic, you probably get yourself blown away with all this event, that event, and probably get into trouble with the authorities. That's all.
Oh, I did get into some trouble.
Then second thing is about the Michael Fay affair.
Yes.
Right? During that time, were you very anxious during your term? Because I remember Goh Chok Tong visited Washington, and he had to explain about human rights and Michael Fay's caning. So to my surprise, usually Goh Chok Tong did not speak very well in public. It's only Lee Hsien Loong who will help him out. But surprisingly, on this occasion, he got on very, very well indeed. But I don't know to what extent you are helping him behind the scene.
No. Again, now I have to say,
time, right?
it was before my time.
Was S.R. Nathan?
President S.R. Nathan, then Ambassador Nathan took the brunt of it. Yeah. And actually, he did a very good job. It was hard, But I came at the tail end, but it hadn't turned. Yeah. And I had to turn the page. But I think the Americans were ready to turn then. But I still had to lift their hand, help them turn the page.
Okay. Now, my third question.
How many questions you have?
One more, four altogether.
Becoming a speaker.
The third one. Okay. Third one, you say you cannot afford a cloud of silence. Of course, Singapore is getting more and more intellectual and all that. But I think one thing lacking is the curiosity. Because if you are not curious, you just don't care, right? Just walk past and then let it be. So if you don't cultivate the interest in curiosity, like a small child, then you just leave it alone. You walk away. Therefore, should we not cultivate the sense of curiosity in the student, particularly the primary level?
You've got something there, I think, that we should be curious. And we have to nurture curiosity. Because if you're curious, you can be inventive, you can be innovative. Without that, you can't. And the curiosity comes from your upbringing, home, schools. Everybody has a role in it. And I think we should try to recapture that. I tend to think if you give people more time, they can be more curious. If your syllabus is very heavy, it's hard to be curious about anything else.
No, I used to attend a company annual general meeting. Yeah. And when you come to question time, the silence is unbelievable. That's why I usually get started by asking the first one or two questions to get it going.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Then my last question. One more, last one. Remember you told me all these ambassadors were told to do something, get the trade pact signed, everything, but they never trained you how to do it. So to what extent is training of the diplomat very important before you throw them into the deep end of the water?
I think you can give some training, and the MFA Diplomatic Academy, they do give some training, some pointers. The best is to observe on the job. You learn from your ambassador. I think if you ask every embassy, I'm speaking in general, that ambassadors go out and they've got to use their wits or use their ingenuity to get things done, But really, it's the experience and doing on the job. And young people sent out to work in certain embassies, if you have a creative ambassador, you pick up the tricks.
What happens if you happen to be a dumb fellow who never want to
learn?
You
wouldn't be made an ambassador, I think.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have
Singapore,
to
at least. Just a quick question.
Yes.
Curiosity. In your tenure, have you seen curiosity kill the cat?
Where? Here or in?
Here. Have you seen that?
No.
Because when you see curiosity kill the cat a few times, your natural curiosity sort of fades away. That's what I'm suggesting, I mean, there used to be curiosity, it begs the question, where did it go and how did it go?
Yeah.
You know?
I think it depends on the individuals to some extent. You know, I'm in this, at the moment my thinking is that we really must restore responsibility, and people must take responsibility. You can help yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, I was in Shanghai recently and I spoke about we have to get more competitive and, you know, young people and so on. And a young student stood up and said, so what can the government do to help us become more competitive? You see, I think that to be more competitive is up to the individual. So I'm really now wanting to restore the sense that, you know, to, you know, encourage people to think that you can do things for yourself and you can help yourselves, and don't wait, you know, for something else. So civil society is good. People should go out and do things.
Don't wait for somebody else.
Don't wait for an answer from, you know, the state or, you know, people, some agency. You can help.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me, if I may.
Sorry. Let's go with you first.
Yeah, okay.
Since you look older.
Good evening, Heng Chee.
Sorry?
Oh, it's Patrick.
I'm your old student.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. I'm awed.
I'm sorry.
I'm awed too.
Did I
Yes.
frighten you or?
No,
in
no,
any
you're
way?
fine. You're fine. You're
Old
fine.
student this life? Oh.
No.
I'm kidding.
He's,
Okay,
he's fine.
please.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Patrick. In case.
Yes, I do
In
know.
case you
I
do
did
not
recognize you.
recognize
Wow.
me.
Yes.
I don't want to disappoint you because you mentioned that students do not ask questions. And I'm one of your old students. So I thought I should break this culture of silence. I think last year, when you first came back, you mentioned about the need for real politicians, not administrative politicians. How do we go about creating this new breed of politicians? There is a new breed of politicians that are coming up from the opposition side, but I hardly see much coming from the government side. How do you think you can help to create this new breed of non-administrative politicians? Secondly, you have walked with princes and kings and presidents. Can you now come back and walk with the common people? Talk with the people, walk with the people, and from the feedback that you get from the common people, maybe convey it to the political authorities, what you garner. Today, the MDA has come out with new rules. I was just wondering, in the light of what you said in the Straits Times letter of 1986, could you revise the letter? And in the light of what's happening today, in the light of the need for creativity, for entrepreneurship, and so on and so forth. I don't want to ask too many questions because that's not very wise to do. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you,
Patrick,
Patrick.
would you want to remain there in case you can have a dialogue?
I can't stand too long.
Okay, sure.
I'm an old man now.
You are not, Patrick. Come on. Now, let me take the easiest question first, which is your middle question, which is having been an ambassador and lived a different life, can I talk to the common people, hear them, and find out what's happening? I'm hearing. I mean, it's not that difficult to, you know, become from ambassador back to a Singapore citizen and get back to the house. For your information, I go to the market. I go to the supermarket. I go to the wet market. You know, I do a lot of things. I'm very hands-on. So it's not difficult at all. And I talk to people. I talk to people in the taxi. And I talk to people when I meet them. I go out to different groups and chat with them, the polytechnics and so on, give talks. And they say what they want to say. So, you know, it's, I can, of course, be more with the people, but my friends are people too. you know. But I hear you, and it is about the concerns of the those less articulate. Well, you can surf, you can read, you can, you know, read the papers. You know what the issues are. I think I know what the issues are in Singapore, you know, and you can see. So it's not an issue at all. Your first question was, oh yeah, the politicians and the real politicians and technocrat politicians, administrators. I think as politics gets more competitive, politicians, everyone becomes a politician. Opposition too, you know, whether they are good politicians or not, you know. And there are some good politicians in the governing party, and there are some good politicians in the opposition. So, but I think they will be better politicians as it gets more competitive. Now, I also want to say, whilst I say that we need political skills, it is true, we do need the political skills, connecting with people, listening, learning how to listen. And do you hear, you see? And translating that into consensus, into things that become policy, you know. And also finding the technical solutions or solutions, which really needs, today's world is very complex, you know. And I am not sure, you know, when Singapore started in 1955 and then 59, there were stories about vegetable sellers, you know, seamstress becoming the politician and member of parliament. You might even put the person in cabinet. I really do not think, in all honesty, that you can do that. Even the opposition parties will not do that.
No,
now.
but we don't have to swing from one extreme to the other. There's a lot in between, isn't it?
Yes, and I think
and
you
I think
will.
That's what Patrick is.
I know that's what you're saying, but I think you're getting some of these in between slowly coming through. And but Singaporeans, don't forget, it's the electorate that votes also, you know, and they are also choosing amongst the opposition. They are choosing for the better candidates, the better educated candidates, and what you may say with some technical skills too. Mm-hmm. So it's not like everybody is jettisoning skills, expertise, you know, technical abilities, and suddenly embracing this so-called politician. I think a politician can engage and knows how to use a process, build, mobilize a vote, build a coalition, connect with people, and speak for them. When he speaks, people say, I identify with that feeling. And that's what it is.
But you see, my sense, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but my sense is your question was also asking about, you know, the space for articulating your viewpoints.
No, that's the last question.
Yeah, that's the last one. So you're going to be addressing that, I hope.
Well, the MDA thing came out,
yeah.
And websites are now going to be licensed.
Licensed and a performance bond of $50,000 has to be put up. I think that's a critical piece of information.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the government wants to do. Is that right or wrong? I would have preferred that they did not do that, you know, but I think they're trying to. Now, there's a great deal about terrorism coming from, it depends on what sites they want to deal with. Is it the racist,
it's just
seditious?
sites.
I know,
Yeah,
but what are they targeting? They will not tell you, you see. So are they targeting those that are going to be racist?
No.
They're
just targeting those which have a high penetration of local.
Oh, this is the Yahoos and locals,
and
yes.
most of them are you know, SPH and so on at this point in time. But I guess the thrust of your question is, what's the signal that such a measure is having? Or Patrick, would you want
Well,
to
the
clarify?
signal is clearly that there's going to be some tightening.
I think, just to continue with this discussion, I think the signals that are coming out from the stratosphere is rather mixed. On the one hand, we have our DPM just a few weeks ago saying that what's happening on the social media is a good thing. Let it continue. It's just starting. It hasn't even matured yet. There's a lot of noise. So that's from the DPM. And then suddenly, boom, today, $50,000. You have to put it up. If anything happens, your $50,000 will be gantong. It's very draconian, you know. So I think the signals that are coming out these days are very mixed. It's like the SSO, you know, before it starts its performance. All the violinists, everybody is trying to strike the, you know, tune the instrument. And only when the violinists come out and start the sound, the one sound, then they start to copy that sound. Having done that, we are waiting for the symphony orchestra conductor to come out and play his tune. But we have been waiting. Still, there's too much of staccato, you know, on the social media, you know, all over. That's why the disconnect is very, very
Well,
great.
the social media is very active, you
Yes.
know, and I do not know actually what is that universe, what is the population we are talking about, you know, because is it 300 people, is it 100 people, is it 3,000, is it 30,000, you know, so we do not know, but it is growing. But on your point about mixed signals, Patrick, I imagine in governance, in any society, you don't have all the policies going in the same direction at the same time. Not even in the United States. People talk of mixed signals too.
Yeah.
What is the government trying to do? And that's governance, you know. So they want, yes, social media is good, but you know, not too much or not too much in that direction. So you want to have it, but you're always trying to balance,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, it's, Patrick, let's, for
Okay,
now.
I'll give you a quick answer to
Yeah.
the numbers,
Quick one,
okay?
because
a
there are a
quick
couple
one.
of other questions.
Okay, I don't want to deprive
Yeah.
others
Yeah.
of the question time. I think if you look at Hong Lim 1 and Hong Lim 2, the numbers is about 5,000 to 6,000. 5,000 to 6,000 times 4 or 5 per family, that's quite a bit. But if you trace the origin of Hong Lim 1 and 2, you have to go back to the earthquakes of 2011. We are supposed to be earthquake-free, but on May 7, 2011, there was a big earthquake measuring about 4 point something on the Richter scale. Then, last year, we have 2 more quakes, one in Aogang, and that measured about 6 on the Richter scale, and then
Yeah, but
recently,
Patrick, you're making
there is the
giving a political commentary.
Pongo East.
Yeah.
That's 5.5 on the Richter scale. All that built up and culminated in Hong Lim 1 and 2. And then with the social media, which has been the churning pot, okay, of the last 3 to 4 to 5 years, today we are feeling more and more disconcerted. That's why the MDA is coming out with these new rules.
Why don't we, I think you made a point, and
Yeah, okay, I
let's
rest
move
my
on.
case.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. I think you made a point. But feel free to ambush her outside later. Right. Bernard.
Ambassador Chan, during your sharing, you of course spoke and shared about many things, but the one that caught me was this description you used that you were concerned about a decent wage. And I think this topic or this issue has been gathering momentum. And I just like to hear your thoughts on, and there are quite a number of people out there who believe that one way really to solve it is to go minimum wage policy. Can I have your thoughts on that, please?
You know, I am not an economist, and I do not want to venture in recommending formulas of what is a minimum wage or not. I remember years back when I asked Dr. Goh Keng Swee, when he was alive, about this. He said, you don't want minimum wage because then everybody will just pay the minimum. But in Singapore, when you have labor shortage, people can walk off with their feet and go to a better job. Now, so I don't want to recommend minimum wage, but I do feel that there is a certain wage that one has to give if you are using people, you know, hiring people, whether at a higher level, but more to, you know, it's people at the lower levels that need protection. That it's got to be decent, you know. And what is it and what can you afford? If you put out too much of a benchmark, some people don't even get a job, you know. But I have to say, I was disturbed when I heard some people were getting $500 for some jobs, you know. So I would put it at that, you know. But I do have a sense that there has to be, you know, a decent wage.
Yeah. Right. In the interest of time.
Oh, there's one? Why not?
2 more questions. Any online question? No, I think we'll. Okay, last 2 questions. Yes, please.
So do I just ask one question?
No, you can ask 2.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, I insist you ask 2.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Professor Chan. My name is Wikiet. I'm a Year 4 Political Science major. So, I've read so much of your readings on Singapore and foreign policy, as you've mentioned, politics of survival. So it's really great to see you back here, and I hope that you will start writing again more frequently, whether is it to the forum or academic journals. I just have 2 quick questions. The first question is, right, as a political scientist yourself, what would you recommend, or how would you encourage, you know, young people to actually pursue a career in political science, or to actually study it as a course in NUS? I recall in the interview you gave, you said when you told your mother, I believe, that you were studying political science, she asked, are you going to jail? And of course that is no longer the case now, but there is still a perception that, you know, like, what can you do with it? What do you do with it? So I would like to hear, like, what do you have to say to that?
You can do so many things with political science. In fact, I used to say this when students came up for interviews, you know, and they had to choose their faculties. I said, you know what? You do political science, when you go out for a job interview, they'll ask you what's happening in Indonesia, what's happening in Malaysia, or what's happening in the US elections. You are a little equipped to answer that when your interview for employment takes place. Nobody's going to ask you about King Lear, you know, or Jane Eyre. I used to say that sort of to the students. But I would say that political science is extremely versatile, because it prepares you to deal with the world as it is, the issues out there internationally and domestically and regionally. And you can be a banker, you can do risk analysis. If you're a good trader, you're a trader, a journalist, a diplomat. You know, you can go into any of the MNCs or local firms. You can do anything. You can teach. And, you know, I would really like to see many young students taking up a PhD in political science. We don't have enough Singaporeans wanting to do PhDs. And there's no point saying, why are you hiring so many foreigners? I can't find people in Singapore. I can't find that corpus of young Singaporeans with a PhD. You know, so there's plenty. Don't be afraid. And it really helps. You can do anything, and you can go into the civil service.
Yeah, thank you for encouragement. Just second and last question. You've been with NUS for over 20 years, and I'm sure one of the things you observe is that the rise and actually the fall of student activism. And you know, after 75, when there was a prominent student leader who was arrested and subsequently went to self-exile, I think student activism in Singapore basically just died out. So what do you think of this development, you know, that students in general no longer play a political role like many of their counterparts in other countries? And do you think that there is more space for students to have a say in, you know, the political development of Singapore? Thank you.
I think there's student activism and student activism. You don't know, student activism isn't just defined by protests and demonstrations and wanting to change the order. That's one kind, you know, one school of student activism. If you go to a US campus, there are young Republicans, young Democrats, you know, there's a Tea Party, young Tea Party. No, there's not very many young Tea Party. But, you know, you have different persuasions. You may even have a fascist party, you know. In Singapore, there was a time of student activism, and it was a loud protest wanting to change the order, questioning the legitimacy of the system. It is not a bad thing if some of that disappears, because something is drastically wrong in a society if that bubbles up all the time, you know. I mean, in Britain, how many of them want to overthrow the government, you know? So, but I think students should be interested in politics. You know, I don't know how, now, I have not been back to the NUS for long, and I do not know how many, I know you have a political association. You know, I don't know whether there's a Democratic Socialist Club, you know.
There is.
So there are different shades, you know. Is there a young PAP here? You know, I don't know. I don't think there is. You see, there's no young PAP, no young Workers' Party, etc. Not allowed. It's no partisan politics. So.
But what about plain rallies?
Plain rallies.
Yeah, rallies. People, you know, holding rallies to articulate their thoughts, their ideas, their ideals. Is that wrong? They don't have to be activists in the way you described it.
Right. Well, I think you have to ask the university authorities here whether they would allow it.
But what's your opinion?
Depending on the rally, you know, you can have a rally for, you know, save the cats. That's a rally, okay? Yeah. A rally that people should vote more or
the one that was killed because of curiosity?
No.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there's a Save the Cats global thing going on, Save the Dog or whatever, you know. But it depends on the rally, you know. But you see, one of the problems is when you do some of these rallies, you will have a counter rally. And
but isn't that what contest of ideas is about?
Sure, but
mean,
you can.
But
but rallies don't contest ideas. Rallies don't, in
organized.
fact. Yeah, they should have debates. Yeah? They should have debates, and I think a lot goes in your social media now. But it's not even debate; it's just a splutter of a feeling, you know. And you really have to be very engaged. There's a young man waiting to ask a question.
So
we've had your
later,
two questions.
You can continue the conversation. Yes. You've got the final word.
Okay. Ambassador Chan, my name is Sawyer. I'm from Purdue University.
Could you bring the mic closer to you, please?
I've been there.
Yes.
Yes.
Glad to hear that you'd been there. And I read in your 2004 interview with the Washington Post that after 8 years, you were about ready to finish your job as ambassador there, but you continued on. So I was wondering, first, what led you to continue on as ambassador in the United States? And also, what changes you saw during your period there over 16 years, and how that changed throughout the three administrations in the U.S.?
Right. Oh, thank you. A good question. Let me deal with the changes first, and I can later end up by why I stayed. I think in the 16 years I was in the United States, I have now I've seen two very distinct things. One, when I arrived in the United States in July of 1996, it was a very confident United States. It was a United States that had just, you know, the Cold War was over, the Soviet Union had dissolved, collapsed in 1992-3, you know, and in 1996, the United States was a hegemon. Your economy was also doing very well. Under President Bill Clinton, he presided over 2 terms, 8 years, of really an excellent, excellent economic growth. And so, you know, the United States was extremely confident. I remember I joined in an exercise, you know. I was invited to an exercise, somewhere was it 1999, when, before the millennium, think tankers and the Center for Naval Analysis did it. And they asked a question, what are the certainties you expect in the 21st century? And we all typed into our computers, it would go on the screen. You don't know who is writing it, but it pops up there. Very many typed in, the United States would be a hegemon. United States will continue to be the only superpower in the world, so on and so forth. So that was the mood in the United States. By the time I left, I think it was July 2012, I've seen the United States go through the recession, the long recession, the deep recession, the bubble burst, and I think the confidence, it's a less confident society. Jobs were going out, unemployment amongst university students. There are university students there who say that in their generation they may not get a good job. So what's the use of all these degrees, And so they've lost a lot of confidence, And so I think that is the big switch. I've also seen wealth explode, it's the 1%, 99%. Globalization has created globally, everywhere, China, Singapore, US, Britain, India, everywhere, Malaysia, every country, a difference between those who are, because of technology, because they are able to take advantage of globalization, become well-to-do, wealthy, very rich, and those who are out of it really get stuck. And that is a global phenomenon, And I think I saw that in the United States. So suddenly, Americans found, gosh, my jobs have gone to India, to the Philippines, to Malaysia, to Singapore, to China, So that's one of the biggest difference. But I also saw opulence that is unimaginable, the way people live, Now, the second thing which has changed very much is the polarization in your politics and the the language of extremism. I think Austin Goolsbee called them the wing nuts, the extreme wings, the wing nuts. So, that sort of became so much, dominated the discourse. You think, my goodness, is this the real thing, you see? So I think that's been the change. And the gridlock in Congress is something that has not been there before. So, and the question is, your economy is doing right. If your politics is not right, I think the US is going to recover economically. Your deficit is becoming less now, But if your politics, doesn't come together, what will it do to the United States in the long run? So that's what I think about. So that, in a short way, I would say it is that. So, and I mean, these are the most important differences. I'm sure there are others, and groups some say they are disenfranchised, and so on. Now, on your question why I stayed, I was asked to stay, and I had thought it was time to go because I'd been there a long time, and it's good for a renewal. It's always good because I said, I know what to do, I know which lever to pull. Maybe someone will come in with a fresh eye, But I was told stay because a new administration had come in and so on. So, so I stayed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this is a good time to end this dialogue. Sorry? The slides, yes.
Oh.
A good way, even better way to end is to show you some pictures of Heng Chee.
I was a lecturer then.
She was a lecturer. Not when I was a student, but she had longer hair then. That was more like it.
And that's Aileen Wong on the other side. This
Wong.
was this was a forum organized by the Democratic Socialist Club. This is Senator Barbara Murkowski from Maryland, and she came to present me with this. All the women senators had autographed this photograph. It's a photograph of them, and they signed and gave it to me. Yeah. This was Singapore Day in New York. As an ambassador, I do that too. And these were some of the people there. There I am, and there is DPM Teo Chee Hean. And this I'm very proud of because our embassy did, and you know, after the Japanese earthquake and the tsunami, 2 Americans in Washington came and asked me, would I join them in organizing something to do something, raise money for the earthquake and tsunami victims. And we had a nice embassy, so we would use the embassy. And I did that. And what I did was to organize the East Asian Summit countries, EAS countries, to contribute, each embassy to contribute 1 dish. And this was the Ambassador's International Buffet. Those who came paid, I think, $300 for the buffet. The money goes to the victims. And I think the Japanese ambassador was so touched, you know. All the countries, China, India, everybody contributed a dish. But I tell you what I feel very proud of about Singaporeans and my staff. A few of them, off their own bat, it was their idea, you see. They went and bought origami paper and folded 1,000 origami cranes. 1,000 cranes is a saying. If you fold 1,000 cranes, it brings blessings. They folded 1,000 cranes. It was like 3 families. You know, they were working in the embassy as they were watching TV, they were folding the cranes. And this was Japanese origami paper. That day in the hall of the embassy, we hung them from the ceiling, a very high ceiling. And I said it was like raining cranes, you know. And I think the Japanese ambassador and his wife almost teared when they saw that, you know, because this is personal effort, you see. And at the end, we took down the cranes, and you're supposed to send it because that brings the blessings. So we sent it to the area, you know, where the earthquake, the tsunami took place, and the nuclear area, Fukushima. And we did this, and we put on a show, and these are some American students who learned to do the Japanese dance, and there we were. My co-conspirator, oh, that's the Japanese ambassador, Fujisaki, and that's Mrs. Fujisaki. That's Susan Blumenthal. She's a doctor. Her husband is a very powerful congressman, a Democrat from Massachusetts. And that's Esther Cooper Smith. She's a doyen of the Washington social scene, the mover, shaker. She organizes things to push candidates forward. She was the first to spot Bill Clinton, she told me, and support his candidacy to become president. So I worked with them to produce this. But really the cranes, the 1,000 cranes that the Singaporeans folded, that was really wonderful. And this is with Prime Minister Ho Ching, Vanu Gopal Menon, the then Herm Rep at the UN, Senator Jim Webb, Senator Richard Lugar, Senator Ben Nelson from Nebraska, Lugar from Indiana, and Jim Webb from Virginia. And we went up to have tea with the senators. And there I was with my DCM, and we were playing Malaysia, mixed doubles. We won.
Was it a diplomatic win?
Well, no, we won, you know. We wanted to win. I mean, I played to win. Yeah, and now that's President Obama.
They look like a bodyguard.
No, I must tell you, they are tall. I am not short by Singapore standards, but they are tall. And I was wearing heels. The ambassador of Syria told me that he said to the president and his wife, "Stop, let me get a box to stand on." We all looked short next to them, both. They were what, 6'5", whatever.
What?
You know, tall, really? 6'4", 5", and she's just as tall. You know, she is tall. Yeah.
Okay. It's a bit scary, you know. It's giving many of us a phobia.
Yeah. So I think.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I'm sure you all agree. It's a bit long today, but I think it's worth it. Were there interesting account stories? But I'm sure many of you, or if not all of you, would agree that it's good to have Ambassador Chan back.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm sure we can look forward to you articulating your views, bridging gaps, being a neutral arbiter with authenticity and intellectual integrity. I'm sure what you learned in NUS is going to put you in good stead as you help us move forward with integrity intact. On that note, I'd like to ask all of you to join me in giving her another round of applause. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
We've got something for you. This is a picture of you and me.
Oh, wow.
Something
Yeah.
I wanted all along. That's why I set up You Alive for this moment.
Right.
They just took it just now.
Oh, wonderful.
You know, technology.
Yes.
Right. And
Thank you.
we'd like you to say a few words. Oops. We'd like you to, oh, your thing. Okay. We'd like you to, it's okay. Like you to say a few words about us, how lovely it is to come back to Singapore, how lovely I was, and stuff like that. No, you can just write and then show. You know, when we did this for Cho Chuan, even he couldn't read it. That confirmed that he's a doctor. So while the ambassador is writing this, next month we have Janet Ang. She's managing director of IBM. Very strong individual, strong views, global perspective. And in July, we have Minister Shanmugam joining us. Yeah. Would you want to read it?
Sure.
Yeah. You need your glasses?
No, I'm no longer recording.
Oh, okay. You can use mine.
Okay. An evening well spent and bringing fond memories of NUS. The best is yet to be. With love, Chan Heng Chee.